When I turned 50 in 1880, the town basically wrote my obituary. Poor Martha. They whispered behind gloved hands at church. Never married. Never had children. Getting old. As if my purpose had expired with my childbearing years. As if I'd somehow failed a test I'd never agreed to take. The whispers followed me everywhere. At the mercantile, women stopped talking when I approached. At Sunday service, they smiled with pity I hadn't asked for. I'd lived in this town my entire life, taught half their children to read, and still, I was invisible. Worse than invisible, I was a cautionary tale. My sister Clara visited on my birthday. She brought cake she'd baked and concern she thought I needed. We sat in my rented room above the milliner's shop, one window overlooking Main Street. Everything I owned fitting in a single trunk. "Martha," she said, setting down her teacup with that careful sound that meant serious conversation was coming. "You can't live like this forever." I looked around my room. It was small. Yes, but it was mine. I'd chosen the blue curtains, arranged the books myself, decided when to light the lamp and when to let darkness come. Live like what? I asked. Alone. She said it like a diagnosis. "You're 50 now. It's time to be practical." She leaned forward, took my hand like I was a child needing guidance. "Come live with us. Help with the children. You'd have family around. Purpose, a real home. Purpose." The word sat heavy between us. What she meant was become unpaid help. What she meant was fade into the wallpaper of her life, exist in service to her children, her husband, her world. I'd be Aunt Martha, the spinster, useful for mending and cooking and all the tasks too tedious for a married woman with better things to do. I smiled, squeezed her hand, said I'd think about it. That night, after she left, I pulled out the land advertisement I'd been hiding in my Bible. I'd cut it from the newspaper 6 months ago, pressed it between the pages of Psalms like a prayer I didn't dare speak aloud. 200 acres, $300, 20 miles west of town. Every time I'd looked at it, I'd thought impossible. Women don't buy land. Women don't start ranches. Women, especially 50-year-old spinster women, don't claim space in the world. I took out my tin box, counted the money I'd saved over 15 years of teaching school, mending clothes, living small. $347, enough for the land with 47 left over. My hands shook as I held the bills. This was everything. If I bought that land and failed, I'd have nothing. No money, no home, no safety net. I'd be poor Martha in truth. Not just in their whispers. But if I didn't buy it, I'd spend the rest of my life being someone's helper, someone's cautionary tale, someone who never took up space. I was 50 years old. I could disappear into my sister's house, or I could take up space in the world. I bought the land the next morning. By afternoon, the whole town knew. By evening, they were laughing. A 50-year-old spinster starting a ranch. I heard them at the post office. Impossible. She'll be broke by winter. Let them laugh. I was done being quiet. 2 years later, autumn 1882, I stood on my own porch, watching leaves fall like copper coins across my land. My land. The words still felt new in my mouth. Those 2 years had aged me and remade me simultaneously. My hands were rough now, cracked from work, strong from necessity. I'd learned ranching the hard way through mistakes that cost money I didn't have and pride I couldn't afford. But I'd learned. The ranch worked. Barely. Some months. But it worked. And I had children. 7 of them. They'd arrived one by one. First was Tommy, 8 years old, left at the train station when his mother died. Then the twins, Sarah and Samuel, abandoned at the church, then Mary, then Joseph, then little Ruth, then Emma, though that Emma would leave and another would arrive. Children nobody else wanted. Turned out we had that in common. I woke before dawn each day to feed 10 mouths, including my own. Made breakfast for children and ranch hands both. Then worked until my body screamed for rest. At night, I fell into bed too exhausted to dream, woke up, and did it all again. I was proud. I was exhausted. I was proving every single person in that town wrong. I was also drowning. That's what I was thinking when I saw the rider coming up the road. Late afternoon, sun slanting gold. Leaves falling around his horse like nature announcing something important. He was maybe 45, weathered the way men get when weather's been their companion longer than people. 3 children sat on the horse with him. 2 boys, 1 girl, all under 12. They rode quiet, patient. Like they'd learned waiting was safer than hoping. The girl was the youngest, maybe 6. She had eyes I recognized, guarded, careful, watching the world like it might hurt her. I knew those eyes, had seen them in my mirror for 50 years. I walked to meet them. Wiping flour from my hands onto my apron, my 7 children stopped playing to watch. They knew strangers meant change. And change in our world usually meant loss. Help you? I asked. My voice came out harder than I meant, defensive. I'd learned to lead with armor. Heard you were hiring, the man said. His voice was quiet, measured, like he'd learned to make himself small. Name's Jacob. These are my children, Daniel, Michael, Emma. I looked at him and saw everything I'd spent 2 years proving I didn't need. A man, someone who'd want to take over. Tell me how things should be done. Assume authority I'd fought to claim. I'd heard it all before from the ranch hands who quit when they realized I actually knew what I was talking about. I run this ranch, I said, making it clear. My land, my decisions, my rules. Yes, ma'am, he said. Didn't argue, didn't posture, didn't offer unsolicited advice about how I should be doing things differently. Just sat there on his horse with his 3 quiet children and waited for my decision. I'd forgotten men could wait. Why'd you leave your last position? I asked. Wife died 2 years back. He said, simple, honest. Been moving since, looking for steady work. Good place for the kids. 2 years, same as me starting this ranch. We'd both been rebuilding while the world watched. I should have said no. I had enough mouths to feed, enough hearts to worry about. But something about those 3 quiet children standing there patient as stones, waiting to hear if they'd have a home, I knew that waiting. Had done it myself for 50 years. I can offer wages, the foreman's cabin, meals for your family. I said, in return, I need help with the ranch. Winter's coming. There's work enough for 3 men. I can do the work of 3, he said. Not bragging, just stating fact. His daughter Emma was watching my children play. The longing on her face hurt to see, like she'd forgotten what playing looked like, what home felt like. When can you start? I asked. Now, if you'll have us. I hired him. Told myself it was practical. Told myself it meant nothing. I was already lying, and he hadn't even started yet. I made the terms crystal clear that first day. This was my ranch, my land, my decisions. Everything ran through me what got planted, what got sold. Which cattle to keep, and which to slaughter. I'd built this place from nothing. And I wasn't about to hand over authority to a man just because he showed up. Jacob nodded once. shook my hand like I was any other employer, and moved his family into the foreman's cabin that afternoon. The cabin was small, but solid. I'd had it built the first year, back when I thought I'd have a rotating door of foremen. Instead, I'd had 3 men quit in 6 months, each one unable to stomach taking orders from a woman. The cabin had sat empty since spring. Now it had life again. Children's voices, lamplight in the windows, smoke from the chimney. I told myself it was just convenient, nothing more. That first week, I watched him like a hawk watches prey, waiting for him to overstep, to assume. To take over in that way men do when they think women need managing. He didn't. He worked dawn to dusk, mending fences I'd been meaning to fix for months, reinforcing the barn for winter, organizing the woodpile with a precision that bordered on military. He never asked permission for these tasks, just did what needed doing. But he also never contradicted me in front of the ranch hands, never questioned my decisions, never acted like his way was better than mine. It should have irritated me. It terrified me instead. Because if he didn't try to take over, if he respected my authority without resentment, then I couldn't use my anger as armor. I'd have to find new reasons to keep him at arm's length. The children blended faster than I expected. His 3 and my 7 circled each other that first day like wary dogs. By the 3rd day, they were playing together. By the end of the week, I couldn't tell whose laughter belonged to which child. 10 children around my table. When had my table gotten so full, I noticed things I didn't want to notice. The way Jacob taught Tommy to properly shoe a horse, patient hands guiding without taking over. Tommy had struggled with it for weeks. Too proud to ask for help, too stubborn to quit trying. Jacob's quiet good work, when Tommy got it right, made the boy stand taller than any praise I'd given. I noticed how Jacob never ate until the children were fed first. How he fixed the drafty window in the orphanage wing without mentioning it. How he stayed up all night when my mare went lame, tending her personally, saving her life and probably saving me from financial ruin. Small things. I told myself they were just convenient, that an employee doing his job well was nothing more than good luck. But then there were the coffee cups. One morning, I found mine on the porch railing, filled, still hot. Steam rising in the cold air. I hadn't made it. Hadn't heard anyone approach. But there it was, prepared the way I liked it strong. No sugar, bitter as truth. The next morning, same thing. And the next, I should have told him to stop. Should have said I could make my own coffee. Didn't need anyone anticipating my needs. Didn't want the intimacy of someone knowing how I took my morning ritual. I didn't say anything. Just drank the coffee and pretended it meant nothing. First snow came early that year. I woke to white covering everything, beautiful and threatening in equal measure. Stepped onto my porch and found the coffee there as usual. The world transformed around it. Jacob had already prepared for winter. Extra wood stacked and covered, barn reinforced. Supplies laid in that I hadn't ordered but desperately needed. He'd anticipated winter like someone who'd survived hard ones. Who'd learned that preparation was the difference between living and dying. I wondered what winters he'd survived, what losses had taught him to see around corners, to know what was needed before being asked. I didn't ask. Wasn't ready for his answer. Wasn't ready to admit I was curious about more than just his work. But standing there with my coffee, watching snow fall on land I'd claimed, and a life I was building, I felt something shift. Like the ground beneath me wasn't quite as solid as I'd thought. Or maybe it was more solid because he was there. I didn't know which possibility frightened me more. Winter settled over the ranch like a held breath. The world went quiet, just wind and snow, and the sound of our combined lives learning to move together. Jacob and I developed a rhythm I hadn't planned and couldn't name. I handled the business account books, supply orders, decisions about hiring and selling, and what direction the ranch should grow. He handled operations cattle management, repairs, the daily choreography of keeping everything running. We developed a language without words. I'd frown at the north fence line during breakfast, and by evening, he'd have wire ordered. He'd pause at the cattle count in the ledger, and I'd already have adjusted the feed budget to compensate. It should have felt like surrender. Like giving up the independence I'd fought so hard to claim. Instead, it felt like breathing. Like I'd been holding my breath for 2 years and finally remembered I could exhale. I noticed his kindnesses the way you notice seasons changing slowly. Then, all at once, the drafty window that mysteriously stopped being drafty. The woodpile that never seemed to shrink no matter how cold it got. My mare's limp disappearing after his all-night vigil in the barn. One morning, I found my account ledger reorganized. Not changed, every number was exactly as I'd left it, but arranged differently, clearer. I could see profit margins at a glance now. Could track expenses without squinting at my cramped handwriting. I should have been angry. Those books were private, my domain, off limits to everyone. Instead, I stood there staring at the neat columns and realized he'd seen me struggling and helped without being asked, without making a show of it, without expecting gratitude or deference in return. When had someone last paid that kind of attention to me, noticed not just what I said I needed, but what I actually needed? The children thrived. His 3 and my 7 became just ours. 10 children who fought and played and existed together like they'd always been a unit. I'd catch Jacob watching them with this expression I couldn't name. Not quite happiness, not quite sadness. Something deeper. Something that looked like healing. December arrived. I'd always made Christmas special for the orphans, despite tight money. It was important they knew someone cared enough to mark the day, to make them feel chosen, even though the world had left them behind. I was planning the usual small gifts I could afford. A special meal. Maybe some peppermint if the mercantile had extra. Then I found Jacob in the barn one evening, bent over his workbench, carving. Wood shavings curled at his feet like snow. Lamplight caught the concentration on his face. "What are you making?" I asked. He looked up, almost shy. "Toys? For Christmas? Hope that's all right." I moved closer, saw what his hands had created. Horses. Small and perfect. A doll with careful features. A rocking chair sized for Ruth's favorite doll. But it wasn't just toys. It was personalized attention carved into wood. The shy child got a gentle mare. The wild one got a Mustang mid-buck. The girl who loved her doll got furniture for it. Each gift tailored to the child who'd receive it. "You've been watching them," I said. My voice came out softer than I intended. "Hard not to," he said. "They're easy to watch. Easy to love. Easy to love." When was the last time anyone had said, "My children were easy to love"? The world had called them unwanted. Burdens. Other people's problems. Jacob called them easy to love. Something cracked in my chest. Small fissure. Barely noticeable. But there. Christmas morning. The children woke to magic. Not store-bought perfection, but something better proof that someone had paid attention. That someone knew them well enough to carve their personalities into gifts. Tommy held his Mustang and didn't speak for a full minute. Just stood there holding it like it might disappear. Finally, he made this just for me. Just for you. I confirmed, nobody ever made me something before. I looked at Jacob across the room. He was helping Ruth set up her doll furniture, patient as stone, pretending not to hear Tommy's words. But his hands shook slightly. He'd heard. That evening, after supper, the children begged for stories by the fire. They always did this, wanted tales of adventure and magic to carry them into sleep. Jacob surprised me by telling one. Not an adventure story, but something quieter. A memory of his late wife. How she'd loved Christmas. How she'd made their cabin beautiful with things that cost nothing but attention. His children curled into him as he spoke. My orphans drifted closer, drawn by the gentleness in his voice. He held grief and love simultaneously, making space for both, showing them it was possible to remember what you'd lost without being destroyed by the remembering. I realized I'd never told the children about my life before the ranch, never shared my hurts or hopes. I was Mama, the strong one, the provider, the woman who'd built something from nothing. I didn't cry in front of them, didn't admit to loneliness or doubt or fear. Jacob was teaching me that strength could include softness, that showing your wounds didn't make you weak. Dangerous lesson, one I wasn't sure I was ready to learn. That night, tucking in my oldest girl, Sarah. She asked, "Is Mr. Jacob staying forever?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "I hope so." She looked at me with those two old eyes children get when they've learned the world isn't safe. "Do you hope so too?" I should have deflected. Should have said something neutral and motherly that didn't reveal my heart. Instead, I said, "Yes, I think I do." She smiled and closed her eyes. I stood there in the doorway, watching her drift to sleep, and wondered when I'd started hoping again. Hope, I'd learned, was dangerous for women like me. Hope led to disappointment, and disappointment led to that special kind of pain that came from wanting things you couldn't have. But standing there, listening to 10 children breathe in sleep, smelling the lingering wood smoke from the fire where Jacob had told stories. I couldn't quite remember why I'd stopped hoping in the first place. February brought influenza like a curse. One day, the children were fine. The next, 4 of them were burning with fever, including Jacob's youngest. Emma. I'd nursed sick children before. It came with the territory of running an orphanage disguised as a ranch. But never this many, this sick, this fast. The house became a hospital. Sheets soaked with fever sweat. The smell of camphor and fear. Sounds of labored breathing that made my own chest tight with worry. For the first time since buying this land, I felt my age, felt 52 in my bones, in the way my hands shook with exhaustion, in the heaviness that settled behind my eyes. Jacob and I took turns through the nights. He'd sit vigil while I slept a few hours. I'd take over while he managed the ranch work that couldn't wait. We moved around each other like dancers who'd rehearsed the steps without ever practicing together. Third night, I was at my breaking point. Emma's fever had spiked at 3 a.m. I'd been cooling her with wet cloths, spooning broth into her when she could take it, sitting with her frightened whimpers. I tried to stand to get fresh water. The room tilted. My vision went dark at the edges. I stumbled. Jacob caught me. His hands solid, real. The only thing keeping me upright. "I'm so tired," I whispered, not just of this night, of 2 years of proving, fighting, defending my right to exist, of 52 years of being strong because the world didn't allow women the luxury of being anything else. He guided me to a chair, brought water, took over with Emma, his hands gentle on her forehead, his voice low and soothing. "You don't have to do everything," he said. 6 words. They shattered me. I cried then. Hadn't cried since buying this land. Hadn't let myself. Crying was weakness, and I couldn't afford weakness when I was too busy proving I was strong enough to survive. But sitting there at 3 a.m, Emma burning with fever, my body shaking with exhaustion. I couldn't hold it anymore. The tears came quiet. Devastating. 2 years of held breath finally released. Jacob didn't try to fix it. Didn't tell me it was fine or that I needed to be strong. Just sat with me while I broke. Then handed me back the pieces when I was ready to rebuild. I'd forgotten what tired felt like. Had pushed past it so long it became normal. But sitting there, I felt every one of my 52 years. Felt 12-year-old Martha who'd lost her mother and became mother to her siblings. Felt every year of being tired and having no choice but to keep going. When did I earn rest? When did I get to be held instead of doing the holding? The children recovered. Slowly, achingly, but they recovered. Emma's fever broke on the 5th day. By the end of the week, color returned to their faces. They started eating again, laughing again, being children again. Something shifted between Jacob and me. I started accepting help. Let him handle morning feeding when I was exhausted. Asked his opinion on cattle sales instead of making every decision alone. Ate the meals he cooked when I was too tired to stand at the stove. Small surrenders that felt like victories. Then Mrs. Henderson came visiting. She was the town's premier busybody, a woman who measured her worth by how much she knew about everyone else's business. She arrived unannounced, as she always did, with cake she'd baked and judgment she thought I needed. We sat in my parlor drinking tea. She looked around at the children's toys scattered on the floor, at the extra coat hanging by the door that wasn't mine, at the second coffee cup I'd left on the table. "Martha," she said in that voice women use when they're about to ruin your day. "People are talking. People always talk." I said, "They're saying it's not proper. A man living on your property. No marriage, no chaperone." She leaned forward, lowered her voice like we were conspirators. "I know you don't care what people think, but you should. Your reputation," "My reputation," I interrupted, "is that I'm a 52-year-old spinster who started a ranch when everyone said it was impossible. I stopped worrying about proper when I bought this land. But the children," she pressed. "What kind of example? The children have a home. They have food and safety and someone who loves them. That's the example I'm setting." She pursed her lips. "I'm just trying to help." I didn't ask for help. After she left, I stood on my porch, shaking, not with anger, with fear, because part of me had listened. Part of me had heard her words and thought she's right. I should fire Jacob, prove my independence, show the town. I don't need a man, don't need anyone. That evening, I watched Jacob with the children, his 3 and my 7, completely blended now, indistinguishable in their ease together. He was teaching the boys to play checkers while the girls practiced reading aloud. Patient, present, fully there in a way I'd never seen a man be with children who weren't his own blood. If I fired him to prove something to Mrs. Henderson and her judgment, I'd be choosing others' opinions over my own comfort, over the children's happiness, over the life we were building. I was 52 years old, too old to live for other people's peace. When Jacob came to get more firewood, I said, "Mrs. Henderson thinks it's improper. You living here." He stopped, waited. I told her any impropriety was in her mind, not my home. He smiled. "Small, but there. And if she comes back, I'll tell her the same thing, and then I'll close the door on her." On that whole way of thinking, I met his eyes. "I'm done living for anyone's approval but my own." "Good," he said simply. "Then, for what it's worth, I think you've been living for your own approval all along. That's why you scare them. Why you scare me a little too. I scare you Any woman who can build all this from nothing, who can stand alone against a whole town's judgment and not flinch. That's terrifying. That's magnificent. He went back to the children. I stood there holding his words like fragile things. Terrifying. Magnificent. When was the last time anyone had called me magnificent? Spring arrived with violence. 3 days of rain turned the creek into a river. By the 4th day, we had flooding. I'd survived 2 years of ranching. Drought, early frost, late thaws. Thought I'd seen the worst nature could offer. Nature laughed at my arrogance. The water came fast. Creek overflowing, spreading across the lower pasture, threatening livestock and house foundation and everything I'd built. Jacob and I worked in tandem moving cattle to high ground, sandbagging the house, securing the children inside with the ranch hands' wives. We worked in rain and mud and rising water. My boots squelched with every step. My clothes were soaked through. I couldn't feel my hands. Didn't matter. The ranch was drowning, and I had to save it. A section of fence broke under the water's pressure. Cattle scattered toward the swollen creek, toward death. Jacob rode after them without hesitating. I saw him go, saw his horse struggle in the mud, saw the moment the animal lost its footing, saw Jacob heading for the water. Time stopped. My heart stopped. Everything in the world narrowed to that single image Jacob going under. I wasn't afraid of losing an employee. I was afraid of losing him, Jacob. The man who carved horses and sat with my fear and never once made me feel small. I rode in, didn't think, just moved, roped his horse, pulled both to safety. We collapsed in the mud, soaked, shaking. The cattle were lost, but we were alive. We were alive. His hand found mine in the mud. Neither of us let go. Back at the house, changing into dry clothes, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not from cold. From the realization of how much I had to lose now, having nothing meant nothing could be taken. Having him meant everything could be. That night, we sat by the fire assessing the damage. Lost cattle. Broken fences. Field flooding that would take weeks to drain. Money I didn't have for repairs I couldn't avoid. "We'll rebuild," Jacob said quietly. "We." Not you. We. I should have corrected him. Should have reminded him whose ranch this was. Whose responsibility. Whose burden to carry. "Thank you," I said instead. "For my life. You saved mine first. It's a life worth saving." He looked at me then. Really looked. "Is it yes?" I whispered. Wasn't talking about just his life anymore. He knew. We sat in silence. Outside. Rain still fell. The creek still raged. But inside, by the fire, something had shifted. Like the flood had washed away more than just topsoil. Had washed away some of the walls I'd built between us. I'd spent 2 years building those walls. Took 2 seconds of him nearly drowning to knock them all down. "When I watched you go under," I said, surprising myself by speaking, "I realized something. You're not just convenient anymore. You're not just good help." He waited, patient as always. "You're necessary," I admitted. "Not to the ranch. To me." The fire crackled. Rain drummed the roof. My heart hammered against my ribs. "I've been necessary to you since Christmas," he said. "Maybe before. Been waiting for you to catch up." "I'm slow," I said. "Spent 50 years learning to stand alone. Don't know how to do anything else." "You're learning," he said. "You pulled me out of that water today. That's not standing alone. That's choosing not to. I thought about that. About choice versus necessity. About the difference between needing someone because you had no other option and needing someone because life was better with them in it. "We'll rebuild," he said again. "Together, if you'll let me." I looked at him across the fire. At this man who'd arrived looking for work and somehow become essential. Who'd seen me at my worst and stayed. Who'd never once tried to take over. Only tried to help carry what I'd been carrying alone. "Yes," I said. "We'll rebuild together. We..." The word felt new in my mouth. Felt right. I should have been terrified. Should have recognized the danger of letting someone become that important. But sitting there, house damaged, but standing. Both of us muddy and exhausted and alive. I couldn't quite remember why I'd been fighting this so hard. Maybe strong women could still lean. Maybe standing together was stronger than standing alone. Maybe at 52, I could learn a new way of being. A week after the flood. I couldn't sleep. Repairs were underway. Ranch was recovering. Children were safe. Everything should have felt settled. Instead, I felt like I was standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying. I walked the property alone. Night sounds surrounded me, crickets. Distant cattle. My own footsteps on earth that belonged to me. I'd walked alone for so long. When had I started listening for his footsteps, too? I stood looking at what we'd built. The ranch. The children. The life that had started as me versus the world and somehow become something bigger. Something that included Jacob in every corner, and I was terrified. Not of the flood or the town's judgment or any external threat. I was terrified of my own heart. Because somewhere between hiring Jacob and nearly losing him, I'd started imagining a future. Not just surviving. Living. And living meant risking everything. I could fire him. Hire a new foreman. Go back to me versus the world. Safe. Lonely. Mine alone. I'd survived 50 years of being alone. Knew how to do that. But sitting with Jacob by the fire, children asleep, I'd realized I didn't know how to not be alone. Didn't have practice in letting someone in. Couldn't sleep either. Jacob's voice came from behind me. Quiet. Unsurprised to find me here. I didn't turn around. Kept thinking about that north fence line. Needs replacing before next rain? We'll handle it tomorrow. Pause. That's not why you're out here. No, it wasn't. He moved to stand beside me. Didn't touch. Didn't crowd. Just stood close enough that I could feel his presence. Jacob, I said. Why did you stay after the flood? You could find easier work elsewhere. Safer work. Better pay. He was quiet so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my wife died 3 years ago. I was broken after. Couldn't imagine feeling home anywhere again. He looked out at the dark ranch. Then I came here. Watched you build this impossible thing ranch. Family. Life out of pure, stubborn hope. Watched you refuse to be small when the world told you that's all you could be. Made me want to be whole again. My throat tightened. This place healed me, he said simply. You healed me, these children, this work, this life. I was a ghost before. You reminded me I could still be alive. I'd been thinking of him as my employee, my helper, my convenient solution to an overwhelming workload. But he'd been thinking of me as his salvation. What if we rebuilt together? The words came out before I could stop them. Not just the ranch. Everything. He turned to me, in the darkness. I could barely see his face, but I felt his attention like lamplight. "Is that what you want?" "Martha, because I'll stay as your foreman forever, if that's what you need. But if you're asking what I hope," his voice caught. "I hope for more." "What do you hope?" I whispered. "I hope for mornings where I don't leave coffee on your porch and walk away. I hope for evenings where we sit together, not as employer and employee. I hope—" He stopped, started again. "I hope you'll look at me and see more than good help." "I already do," I admitted. "That's what terrifies me." I'd been 17 when Thomas Henderson asked to court me. I'd said yes. He'd married my prettier sister instead. I'd learned then, wanting doesn't mean having. Better not to want. But here in the dark, with Jacob talking about hope like it was something safe instead of dangerous, I wanted, God help me, I wanted, "I see you, Martha," he said quietly. "Have since I arrived. Question is, do you want to be seen? I'd spent 50 years being invisible or being pitied. Being poor Martha or that spinster or someone's free help. Did I want to be seen as myself, as a woman worth choosing? I don't know how," I said, honestly. How to be seen. How to let someone in. I've been alone so long. Jacob, it's the only thing I know how to do well. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "I haven't been since you hired a stranger because his daughter's eyes reminded you of yourself." He'd noticed that. I hadn't known he'd noticed. "You saw that?" I asked. "I see everything about you. The way you count supplies twice to make sure there's enough. The way you check on the children 3 times before bed. The way you stand on this porch every evening like you're making sure it's all still real." He paused. "I see you, Martha, all of you, and I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to." I didn't answer that night. Wasn't ready, but I didn't walk away either. We stood there in the dark. 2 broken people who'd somehow found each other in the middle of nowhere. And I let myself stand in the possibility of more without running from it. That was new. That was everything. Walking back to the house, I realized I'd spent my whole life being brave about the wrong things. Brave about being alone. Brave about not needing. Maybe real bravery was letting myself need. Letting myself be needed. Maybe at 52. I could learn a new kind of courage. Summer arrived. The ranch recovered from the flood. Fields greened. Cattle fattened. Children thrived. Everything should have been perfect, except Jacob's brother wrote from Colorado. Offered him a partnership in a ranch there. Good opportunity. Fresh start for him and his children. Jacob showed me the letter. Didn't hide it. Didn't make the decision without me. Just handed it over and said, "Say the word, and I'll stay. Say nothing, and I'll understand." The choice was mine. I spent the day alone, riding property lines, thinking. The prairie stretched endlessly, grass rippling like water. A hawk circling overhead in patterns that looked like freedom. I thought about the girl I'd been. The one who'd said yes to Thomas Henderson and learned that yes meant nothing if the other person wanted. Someone else. The woman I'd become. The woman who'd bought land when everyone said it was impossible. Who'd built a ranch out of stubbornness and saved children nobody else wanted. The woman I might still become. I'd thought independence meant needing no one. But watching those 10 children play in the yard. 7. I'd chosen. 3 who'd chosen me, I understood. Independence was having the strength to choose your own interdependence. I'd spent my whole life being chosen last, or not at all. Built this ranch to prove I didn't need choosing. But Jacob wasn't asking me to need him. He was asking if I wanted him. Different question entirely. I found him in the barn that evening. He was mending tack, hands steady, face carefully neutral. "I don't want a partner for the ranch," I said. He nodded, started to speak. "I want a partner for life." I continued, "If you're offering, I'm accepting." His hands stilled. He looked up at me. "I'm offering, been offering since Christmas. If you'd been ready to hear it." I wasn't ready then. And now I'm terrified, I admitted. But I'm more terrified of you leaving than I am of you staying. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. He set down the tack, stood. I'm terrified too. Seems like fear is just part of loving again after losing. We do it anyway. Loving. He'd said it out loud. "Jacob, you don't have to say it back," he said quickly. "Not until you're ready. I'll wait." "I'm good at waiting." "I know you are," I said, "but I'm done making you wait." I crossed the barn, stood in front of him, this man who'd arrived looking for work and become essential, who'd seen me at my worst and stayed, who'd carved toys and fixed windows and sat with my breaking and never once tried to fix me, only helped me heal. "I love you," I said. The words felt new and old simultaneously, like something I'd been trying to say for months and something I'd known my whole life. It terrifies me, but I do. He smiled, actually smiled. Wide and real and beautiful. "Marry me," he said. "Not for the ranch or the children or because it's practical. Marry me because I love you and you love me, and life's too short to be alone when we could be together." I thought about my sister suggesting I live with her family. Thought about Mrs. Henderson's judgment. Thought about every person who'd ever called me poor Martha. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I'll marry you." We married in September. Small ceremony at the ranch. My sister came, surprise and something like pride on her face. The town talked. Of course, 53-year-old bride. Scandal. But I didn't hear them anymore. Had better things to listen to. I kept my name on the deed. Our lawyer raised eyebrows. But Jacob insisted. "It's your land," he said. "I'm just lucky to stand on it with you." The night of our wedding. I stood on the porch, looking at the ranch. Our ranch now, though still in my name. Jacob came up behind me. Didn't touch. Just stood close. "Regrets?" he asked. I thought about poor Martha. About 50 being the end. About all the years of being invisible. "None," I said. "You, not a single one." And I believed him. Summer arrived. The ranch recovered from the flood. Fields greened, cattle fattened, children thrived. Everything should have been perfect, except Jacob's brother wrote from Colorado. Offered him a partnership in a ranch there. Good opportunity. Fresh start for him and his children. Jacob showed me the letter. Didn't hide it. Didn't make the decision without me. Just handed it over and said, "Say the word, and I'll stay. Say nothing, and I'll understand." The choice was mine. I spent the day alone, writing property lines, thinking. The prairie stretched endlessly, grass rippling like water. A hawk circling overhead in patterns that looked like freedom. I thought about the girl I'd been. The one who'd said yes to Thomas Henderson and learned that yes meant nothing if the other person wanted. Someone else. The woman I'd become. The woman who'd bought land when everyone said it was impossible. Who'd built a ranch out of stubbornness and saved children nobody else wanted. The woman I might still become. I'd thought independence meant needing no one. but watching those 10 children play in the yard. 7. I'd chosen. 3 who'd chosen me. I understood. Independence was having the strength to choose your own interdependence. I'd spent my whole life being chosen last or not at all. Built this ranch to prove I didn't need choosing. But Jacob wasn't asking me to need him. He was asking if I wanted him. Different question entirely. I found him in the barn that evening. He was mending tack. Hands steady, face carefully neutral. "I don't want a partner for the ranch," I said. He nodded, started to speak. "I want a partner for life," I continued. "If you're offering, I'm accepting." His hands stilled. He looked up at me. "I'm offering, been offering since Christmas. If you'd been ready to hear it." I wasn't ready then. And now I'm terrified, I admitted. But I'm more terrified of you leaving than I am of you staying. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. He set down the tack, stood. I'm terrified too. Seems like fear is just part of loving again. After losing, we do it anyway. Loving, he'd said it out loud. "Jacob, you don't have to say it back," he said quickly. "Not until you're ready. I'll wait. I'm good at waiting." "I know you are," I said, "but I'm done making you wait." I crossed the barn, stood in front of him, this man who'd arrived looking for work and become essential. Who'd seen me at my worst and stayed. Who'd carved toys and fixed windows and sat with my breaking and never once tried to fix me. Only helped me heal. "I love you," I said. The words felt new and old simultaneously, like something I'd been trying to say for months and something I'd known my whole life. It terrifies me, but I do. He smiled, actually smiled. Wide and real and beautiful. "Marry me," he said. "Not for the ranch or the children or because it's practical. Marry me because I love you and you love me and life's too short to be alone when we could be together." I thought about my sister, suggesting I live with her family. Thought about Mrs. Henderson's judgment. Thought about every person who'd ever called me poor Martha. "Yes," I said. "Yes. I'll marry you." We married in September. Small ceremony at the ranch. My sister came. Surprise and something like pride on her face. The town talked. Of course. 53-year-old bride. Scandal. But I didn't hear them anymore. Had better things to listen to. I kept my name on the deed. Our lawyer raised eyebrows, but Jacob insisted, "It's your land," he said. "I'm just lucky to stand on it with you." The night of our wedding. I stood on the porch looking at the ranch. Our ranch now, though still in my name. Jacob came up behind me. Didn't touch. Just stood close. "Regrets?" he asked. I thought about poor Martha. About 50 being the end. About all the years of being invisible. "None," I said. "You, not a single one." And I believed him.